We're going to begin this hour with a conversation about policing in America following the death of Tyre Nichols. As you heard, there are a lot of people who want change. With us now are Keith Taylor, a former assistant commissioner of the NYPD, who now teaches at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and Alexis Hoag-Fordjour. She's a former civil rights attorney and federal public defender in Tennessee. She is now co-director of Brooklyn Law School Center for Criminal Justice. We welcome you both to the table this morning. I want to know what struck you most about this case.
Outrage.
Keith, you go first, and then Alexis, please.
Outrage. Absolute. Unbelievable that such inhumane treatment would be conducted by professional law enforcement officers. It really was awful to the discipline.
Yeah.
Speaking as a retired officer yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's painful. What we heard and then what we saw, if we chose to watch, was the devaluation of Black life.
Yes.
At the hands of Black officers in a majority Black city.
Was that surprising to you, Alexis?
It wasn't.
It was not.
It was not. Wow.
Why not?
No, law enforcement, and I know my colleague can speak to this, is premised on control, subordination, and violence. These are tried and true tactics, regardless of the race of the individual officer. And society at large carries a presumption of dangerousness and criminality when it comes to encountering Black people. And again, regardless of the race of the individual officers, this is what they see when they see a Black motorist.
Yeah, Ben Crump said it, he's been saying all weekend that it's not really about the color of the officers, it's about the color of the person that's being pursued.
Exactly.
But I think many people, Black people in particular, thought, did you not see him as your brother, as your cousin, as a nephew? I think many were struck by the inhumanity of how this man was treated, by anyone.
There was a former president said, trust but verify.
Yeah.
You can have the best wishes or intentions for situations, but you need to have accountability measures. They have to be strong. As Americans, we should be outraged that American citizens are subjected to this type of treatment.
There is outrage. There's also body camera footage, and there is in other cases as well. And yet the body camera does not seem to restrain people in all cases. So we come quite quickly to the question of what do you do to fix policing, given what you're describing when it comes to the person that they encounter, the thoughts in their minds. How do you fix the culture of policing?
This was a perfect example of how an intervention like body-worn cameras, which are conversations happening all over this country, as a type of reform, don't actually work. These officers knew they were on film from their dash cam, from their body cam, and from the aerial cameras, right? And so it did not prevent any of their unlawful conduct, making commands that they knew Mr. Nichols couldn't comply with, even though it was all on film. And so my really strong sentiment is that to decrease violence between law enforcement officials and the public is to decrease the contact and intervention that police have with the public.
Fewer traffic stops.
Exactly. They don't need to be, police do not need to administer stops in basic traffic violations. I know all of us, I can confidently say, have engaged in a minor traffic violation. And to be pulled over and told to get down on the ground and to be immediately tased, we don't need that level of escalation from an armed police officer.
It's not about training and who was hired for this job?
Exactly.
Doesn't that matter?
The Memphis Police Department is a department that has been under federal court monitoring since the late 1970s for violating the civil rights of Memphians. DOJ has had, and the federal court issued a consent decree in the late 1970s. There's been continuous federal court monitoring. This is a department that is engaged in de-escalation training. Chief C.J. Davis, first Black female police officer, came in on a wave of reform. But where was the de-escalation there?
Keith, you're a former NYPD officer. Why do you think, after all of that, the other first responders and even the police officers themselves failed to do anything to help him once he was where they wanted him to be?
Because often in situations like this, if you intervene, then you may be seen as someone who is not part of the team.
Is that right? By other police officers?
Or other first responders. So national standards would go a long way towards making accountability the priority of police leadership regarding how these things happen to begin with.
You're talking about the George Floyd Policing Act.
George Floyd Policing Act. And it's
Do you really think, Keith, they didn't want to intervene because they didn't want to seem like they weren't part of the team? Or do you think that they agreed on what was happening?
I don't know exactly what they were thinking, but it could range from indifference to agreeing with the abuse.
But Keith, one of the pieces of pushback on the George Floyd Policing Act is that it changes qualified immunity, which is what protects officers when they do something that they get in trouble for. And some say if you take that away, we already have a recruiting issue in policing. We already have a morale issue. If you take that away, you're going to even have a worse recruiting issue.
Accountability standards should not have anything to do with recruitment. You need to hold individuals accountable when they have awesome responsibilities over communities, especially communities of color and poor communities, which have dealt with the brunt of police excessive force and corruption for many years. It is incumbent on our elected officials to do their job and to figure out how to get legislation passed that makes meaningful change to these police departments across the country.
Alexis, Ben Crump in the last half hour called this a watershed moment in policing. Do you agree?
Indeed. And we had a watershed moment just 2 years ago, 2.5 now, with George Floyd's murder. And we saw the swiftness of the video release. We saw the swiftness of criminal charges and indictment and trial. This was a new wave, and we've turned a corner. But I don't want to live in a society in which we're just quicker to respond after lethal violence has happened. I would rather prevent that lethal violence on the front end.
Yeah. All right, Alexis Hoag-Fordjour and Keith Taylor, thank you very much for being here, both of you. Appreciate it.